Watch is off by several minutes. Town of Sangerville Board of Selectmen meeting, February 21st, 2018. Our select board is present. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 2, we're going to table. Item 3, treasurer's warrants. Payroll number 20, 22, and accounts payable 19, 21.
I'll make a motion to approve payroll 2022 and accounts payable 19 and 21.
Second.
All in favor? Open session. Would someone like to speak?
Yeah,
Please introduce yourself.
Steve DeGoosh, 386 French's Mill Road. I'm here to just speak briefly about what's referred to in short terms as the food sovereignty ordinance, but the longer term is local food and community self-governance ordinance. I have a list. I've given a list like this to Lois for the sort of the official bundle associated with this item, but it includes at the top a list of the 22 communities in the state that have adopted the ordinance, and at the bottom nearly 40 communities that are considering it, including 2 others in Piscataquis County, Parkman and Brownville. The ordinance is intended to provide some relief to local food producers, food growers, food processors, as well as the people who acquire those things from those people, so that licensure and inspection is not required for local exchange and face-to-face exchange for local consumption. It doesn't deal with retail, it doesn't deal with all the other things that are typically dealt with by state licensing, and it also doesn't deal with meat and poultry. It's unusual in that most ordinances tend to be restrictive, and this is not restrictive, it's permissive. So there are no thou shalt nots or anything of that nature in this ordinance. The language is simply permissive that says, I have the right to grow food and I have the right to exchange it with you, and that is an agreement that's based on trust between us. And that as long as that's the nature of the exchange, the state does not have a right to intervene in that. For your background, this past year, Paul Davis actually chaired a committee that looked at legislation at the state level, which dealt with this issue of local home rule with regards to food. And the ordinance or the law that was passed basically says that if a municipality adopts this ordinance, the state will not preempt. So the state has acknowledged home rule and allows municipalities to adopt this. So we've met the requirement for signatures. There were 5 extra validated signatures beyond the 62 required based on 10% of the last gubernatorial vote. And so what we'd like to do is have you and I know this is a crazy time of year, but we'd like to set up a public hearing for this at a time frame soon enough where we can make arrangements with people to come in and sort of provide background information on this. They're basically the folks who developed this model ordinance and were some of the first adoptees in the state. And their time is kind of busy too, going to towns among those that are considering this. So we'd like to get an invitation out to them and have someone come over and sort of assist in the discussion.
So the process of getting this on the warrant for town meeting, you've presented the board with your petition. They still have to discuss and either allow or disallow that
Right.
ordinance to go forward.
Okay. I guess then this is a formal request that you allow.
Right.
Right.
And we will do that, but we're not prepared to do that tonight, obviously.
Okay.
I do have it sounds like the state is kind of lined up, that they've already kind of passed some legislation that makes this work.
Yes.
Where do you stand, or what's your feeling federally?
Most of the inspections that have happened with respect to state authority. And it's really interesting in sort of the history of food that prehistoric, some of us would go collect food, hunt or whatever, and bring it back and it would be shared. So the sharing of food has always been a traditional thing and a human right. And somehow, without allowing it, states and feds have ended up with the assumption that they have the right to inspect and license. And so this is a way of sort of bringing it back and saying, through home rule, Maine's fortunate in that regard, that no, this is a local concern and this is a human right, and so we assert sovereignty. We claim sovereignty over food. I think that, there was a wrinkle in what happened this summer with Paul's committee. They approved and recommended adoption of the law at the state level, and it passed. And then the feds sort of came back to the state and said, we're the ones responsible for meat and poultry inspection. And in this, with every state, they have a different relationship of how that happens. And in the state of Maine, Maine has inspectors, state inspectors, who work on behalf of the federal government. And the state said, if you permit this to happen with meat and poultry, then we will yank that back and the feds will be doing the inspections. And so the state had to think about that in 5 minutes and then call a special session and said, okay, we do not want the feds asserting control over the state, no more than the towns want the state asserting control over the towns. And so they changed it to say, this applies to everything except meat and poultry. Let's see, I saw you Friday when I brought this into the town office. On the 17th, the night of the 17th, which may have been that night, I got a copy of a new model that takes that into account, which inserts the relevant state law, which is not part of this language, and makes a clear statement about meat and poultry not being covered by this ordinance. And so that language will need to be addressed at the hearing, so that language can be modified, so that the draft that goes to the town meeting is clear. And I think I'm correct in saying that the changes to the language in the ordinance happens at the hearing.
Post-hearing, but yes.
Yep. Does that answer?
Yep.
Because nowhere in here does it address the meat and poultry.
No.
Right, I didn't, because when you were referencing that, I thought, well, this doesn't say anything about meat and poultry.
Right.
Okay.
So I spent yesterday going through the new model and highlighting all the stuff that ought to be changed in ours.
Aha.
And it's not anything of substance, other than what I've told you. It's the meat and poultry basically, and then the reference to the new state law that was passed this year since that version of the model ordinance was adopted or promoted.
You guys, any more questions?
I think that's it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak?
And no offense, I'm going to leave soon because
That's
Perfectly fine.
Feel free.
I guess we're good. Selectmen concerns, item 5. Done? Committee reports, the road commissioner.
I'm posting my heavy loads limited signs.
Okay,
Is that okay?
I'm getting a big piece of equipment.
Just if it's after, when it's frozen, you can still,
It's gonna be in
Okay,
the
so
teens
early in the
tomorrow morning.
morning.
early in the morning or late in the evening.
We're on a cold, cold day.
Yep. As long as there is no standing water on the road. That's the rule.
Okay, that's interesting. Oh, good.
Item 7, new business. A, approval of overdrafts, cemetery account.
Yep, our cemetery, sexton, he did more repairs than we had budgeted for in the amount of $265.32. And you have, that needs to come out of your contingency, and you need to vote on it as a board at a board meeting, and it needs to go in the town report to approve that.
Motion,
Make motion to approve.
Second.
those in favor? 3. Sand.
We know we've been talking about, we're low on sand. Chris and Warren, they did the sand last fall, and in their contract, it says if we need to buy additional sand, it's at $15.75 a yard with a minimum of 300 yards. I talked to Steve Lawson today, and he has sand in Abbott, and he can get that to us, and he would even mix it for us if we needed it to, at $14 a yard if he uses our loader to mix. So he kind of wants to know if we're gonna go. He'd rather do the 500 versus 300, of course, because he would have to open his pit. I do know that I think Chummy's pit is open with 1,000 yards. I think they opened that yesterday.
Oh, so Steve's is in the pit, it's not Steve's pile that he already has out?
Correct, correct.
Oh.
So either way, they're in the pit.
It's like $1.75 difference.
Me too.
I mean, you can wait and then see. A suggestion today was go straight salt. When I talked to Steve, he keeps a calendar on events, snow events. And at this time last year, for the rest of the season, there were 10 events.
Whoa.
If you look at the 10-day right now, there's 3.
We've been sanding the last 3 nights. I
Yeah,
mean,
especially on the
they're
dirt
spot
roads.
sand, and they're not running the sander full tilt
Right.
every road, but
But based on what Warren said to you, just in the next 10 days, we will wipe out the pile.
Yep.
If we don't do anything, if that weather occurs.
if it happens, yep.
I don't see that we have any choice.
What do you want to do?
300 or 500, I guess is the question.
300 to 500,
500.
Steve
You don't want
versus,
500.
We're paying way more for it. I
Yeah.
wanna
There's a
get
lot of sand.
The least amount of sand that we can possibly get.
Yeah, but we also don't wanna have to get any more, but.
Right.
Well,
and it-
no, but
and it does
we're
keep-
paying a good 40%.
No, I know.
There's no way we're gonna use 300 yards for
Okay.
the rest of the year. I wouldn't bet my paycheck on that, cause we don't know weather, but I'm going to, yes, very hoping we're not gonna use 300, that's a lot of storms.
It's kind of interesting because that was a pushback, but you weren't at the last budget committee meeting, but we were fighting for more sand and some were fighting for less. And this is exactly why.
Yeah.
If we could sweep the parking lot today, you'd probably get, cause I got out of my truck and sank a half an inch right in sand.
Yeah.
but on days, like in the
Oh, I
mornings,
know.
yesterday morning, this morning, it's a bottle. I've
Oh,
got
I
pictures
know.
where it's reflecting the building on the ice.
Well, the other night when we got out, it was really, really bad, so.
Yeah, we gave her a ride across the parking lot.
Whoa.
Yeah,
So, and that's gonna come from contingency.
No.
no,
You've
that
got the,
will come from your sand budget.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have a choice.
You
You have
don't-
to
that's-
guarantee the roads that are safe, you have to spend this money.
That's right.
Well,
So-
and keep in mind, your warrant hasn't been written yet, so you can adjust those numbers before you go to town meeting if you need to and you want more.
$300.
Yep, 300, and do you wanna go with Lawson?
Yeah.
I wanna go with whatever you can do the cheapest.
Right.
All right,
So
so I
if you
need a
wanna make a
motion.
phone call to, that's what you got for a price last year, just double check that price. If that's still the best they'll do, then we're gonna have to.
With, you mean with Steve?
No, with
Or I mean
Chris.
without Chris?
Yeah, I mean, you got that last summer,
It's in the contract.
I know, but I would just ask if there's a way to lessen it.
Yeah, I mean, you
Okay.
can negotiate with them.
So 300 yards, cheaper price.
Right. I mean, is it worth calling around or no?
There's
No,
not
no.
many options.
Okay, okay.
The rumor is there's very little sand.
Yeah. When I called Haley's, they said they weren't selling to anybody outside their normal clientele,
Wow.
so.
And I wonder what their price is anyways.
Okay. Gonna make a motion?
Yeah, 300 yards for the cheapest price.
Yep,
Right.
that's the motion.
Who's making the motion?
I'll do it.
Dave.
Second?
That won't hurt. I don't wanna make that.
All in favor? Three. Three bought sand.
But we do,
Yeah. How much are we gonna mix with salt? Or how heavy do we wanna mix it? Cause I've only got that one load of salt. Is that gonna be enough to mix with that 300 yards? Yeah, you think so?
Yeah, I bounced it off Chris too.
Okay.
I mean, you don't want to spread sand injection.
well, and you know, and that's the other thing, and I'm assuming about that 300 yards they put in the contract was figuring you had to make it worth them opening up the pit. So if the pit is open and they're pulling out of there, maybe you can get less than 300 out of that pit now.
For
I mean, it's-
less than 1575.
Yeah, and less than 300 yards.
Okay, less than 300.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When he gave you those numbers, he's thinking, you're gonna call me in
Right.
January and that pit's gonna be closed and we're gonna have to plow, we're gonna have to do everything to open it.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody else has already had them open it, so is that,
Yeah,
Help us.
you might have some flexibility.
Okay,
he may not, but I would ask those questions.
all right.
Comic break.
Do you have a tea kettle in there? We can make that tea for her.
I don't, I have a microwave right there though.
Yeah, you can
Say
microwave.
microwave and some water.
No, moving.
Do you want to make a cup of tea?
No, that's all right.
Okay.
I just don't want a coffee.
Thank you.
Moving on to C, the FOIA policy.
Yeah, I gave you copies of the FOA policy, I emailed it earlier. I think the only question that we had was the wording for the form of request encourages, in writing, state law says you cannot, require it to be in writing. So, but we have, if you'll notice on the last page, this is the form, and whoever takes, the request can fill out this form. So we don't have to make the person doing the requesting fill out the form, but I need to have this form filled out. So the office ladies will have to fill this out if the requester is refusing to fill it out.
Should we add that to your personnel policy? That's a requirement.
So,
Well,
What's the
there's
requirement?
language in here that says the FOIA officer.
that I'm the
It's the town
full,
manager.
yes, it's in here.
Correct, but my question is, if we can't mandatory, if you can't require a citizen to do this, now you're basically, what we're saying is, if somebody comes in and they don't wanna fill this out, you're gonna have the girls in the office do that, and then it's gonna come to you.
Right, it has to come to me because I'm the
Correct.
officer.
So what I'm saying is, in our employee policy, should you have that they are required to do this?
No, it's covered right here in the policy.
That our staff, you mean? You mean that
Yes.
are the office staff?
Yes.
Any town of Sangerville employee receiving a FOA request shall forward the request to the public access officer. So anybody that receives that request, I'm gonna inform them, please put it on this form so that I can clarify if I need to or when I fill the request.
I just wanna make sure that we are all ensured that that's gonna be followed.
Yes,
So if this policy enforces that at the employee level, so it covers you, then we're okay.
it does, make that wording.
Yeah, it'll be like any other task that's required of them, it would seem to me.
Okay.
And were there any other questions that everybody had a chance to read through?
Did this come from another municipality?
Came from the town attorney, and I'm assuming she probably adjusted it from another town to match what we need.
So the town of Sangerville may charge fees for public records in accordance with Maine Revised Statute 408A, including but not limited to. Have you read 408?
I have not, but I'm assuming it's telling, what you can charge. That's where the $15 per
Kinda
hour.
has it over
It
here.
used to be the $10
That's
per
right,
hour.
yeah.
They've increased that rate to 15. Our old form says $10 an hour. And I sent it to MMA and they said, no, you don't want that because it's 15 now, but it's state law.
And isn't, from the workshop, I thought it was customary to provide like the first hour at no
Yes,
charge.
yes.
But it doesn't say that here, does it?
No, but that's why it's in accordance with that law.
That's my only concern, is I wanna make sure that they still got that.
I know, that's why I kinda wish there was actually verbiage right in this, instead of the reference. So that way they wouldn't have anybody that requested and they say, well, that's not what I expected.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is if a person takes this home with them, they're not going to know that.
Yeah.
No. And not only that, does this address the issue of you spending the time to dig in, to get information for somebody to just come in with a phone and go click and take a picture of it? Because we kinda wanna get away from that.
Well, I do have another, from MMA, that's why we want a form so that we can track how much they come in. And so if they coming in consistently for the same issue, I can mark on the form how much time is spent. So that even though it's not per instance, I can accumulate it over 30 days. And MMA has said that that's acceptable and it's been through court that that's acceptable. So they can't come in and say, well, this, I only asked for this and
So,
it doesn't matter, it's accumulative.
aha.
Now, would you read in the parentheses, it says, not more than $15 per hour after the first half hour of staff time per request.
First
Is that-
hour.
First hour.
First hour.
First,
So,
okay.
yes,
Oh, so it
you
is
were right.
there.
It is there. That's what I was looking for.
And this is only referencing copying. Even back in here, inspection and copy, a person may inspect any public record during reasonable office hours, a person may copy a public record at the town office. When I read
Well-
copy, I mean, I think copy, photocopy.
They can take a picture of it, I can email it, or we can physically copy. But if we copy, there are fees associated with that.
I think it looks pretty good.
Are you trying to pull that up?
Yeah, I have it. You want the 408A, number 8?
Is there any other better verbiage than what we have, or?
Except as otherwise specifically provided by law, a court order, an agency or official having custody of a public record may charge fees for public records as follows. The agency or official may charge a reasonable fee to cover the cost of copying. The agency or official may charge a fee to cover the actual cost of searching for, retrieving, and compiling the requested public record of not more than $15 per hour after the first hour of staff time per request. Compiling the public record includes reviewing and redacting confidential information. The agency or official may charge for the actual cost to convert a public record into a form susceptible for a visual or oral comprehension or into a usable format. An agency or official may not charge for inspection unless the public record cannot be inspected without being compiled or converted, in which case paragraph B or C applies, which were the two previous. The agency or official may charge for the actual cost of mailing, may require payment of all costs before the public record is provided to the requester. So that is everything right there.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Yeah, you're looking for a motion for the Town of Sangerville Freedom of Access Act policy?
I'll make a motion to accept the Town of Sangerville Freedom of Access Act policy.
Second.
More discussion? In favor? Adopted. Old business personnel policy.
Okay, so we only had a few notes to discuss. Under disciplinary action, your question was, can the manager have discretion of the length or the frequency of the infraction? And do we have to erase infractions after a certain time? Her question was, why is it a good behavior that you're erasing the infraction for? That shouldn't be considered, because if this shouldn't necessarily count. You shouldn't be bound to an arbitrary timeline, was what she said. You want to keep everything in the personnel file and be able to look back to it and say, you know, I've seen this in the past. And yes, the manager can have discretion with the way it's written.
So that was,
that question.
right.
On the vacations, you asked, should we grandfather the current employees? She said she would refrain from putting anything in the policy itself. If you want to keep the current employees at their rate, just have them sign a document and put it in their personnel file.
Wow, that's good. That's
fine.
great.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yep.
And the personal effects clause, she said that we changed it. It's the very last page. The town agrees that personal effects will be replaced within the limits and conditions set forth in the town's workers' compensation plan. And not knowing what the town's, because it's through MMA, so whatever MMA would cover, that's what would get covered. That's why you qualify it by saying it's in the workers' comp plan.
Was that there before?
Yeah.
It was. Oh, okay.
And she did change the stipend for cell phone coverage, usage, at your discretion. Just said at your discretion. She didn't want to put in a dollar figure in there because you may want to only give $10 a month. Or,
Yeah, but over time you
but
can
over
increase and
time,
you don't
right.
change the policy.
So just
Perfect.
leave it at the
Yep.
board's discretion, and that way it doesn't
Yep.
fall on my responsibility. It's your responsibility.
Perfect.
And you're going to be doing the review of health insurance, and so it just can be your yearly review.
Yeah, that's great. A little bit more generic. That's great.
Is there anything else?
No, that was all.
Pretty good.
This was my copy from last time, and those were all the notes I had in there that you had asked for.
This is a lot cleaner.
Yeah, so, and those changes, well, there weren't any changes, you just answered.
Just that
you
personal
and the
effects
vacation.
clause.
Yeah, okay. So, I'll make a motion to approve and adopt the Town of Sangerville Personnel Policy amended February 21st, 2018.
Second.
Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Select-board letter.
Yeah, it is. Much meaner.
Item 9, correspondence.
None.
None. Item 10, request for additional agenda items.
None.
Executive session?
Nope.
None. Ready to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded? Favor? Done?
Did you second?
Yeah, second,
Yep.
yeah. That's what this meeting had. So we get a half an hour.